Welcome to Courageous Conviction. Remember that Jeff and I record each Saturday 5 episodes. So please hit the like button, subscribe so you catch all 5 episodes. We usually start out with one theme or topic. We have to go down a lot of rabbit holes to really understand it. Some things are more sensitive than others right now, what's going on in the world. So hit the like button, subscribe, and let's jump into this video.
Are we sure about that? Now, if they're children of God, why can't they get baptized?
They cannot be baptized if they've undergone an operation. There's no baptism there.
Are we sure about that?
Well, I think it just depends on whether they're willing to go back to the same, biological gender. I don't think there's a gray area. I don't think so. I don't think that.
This director on his website, and if I encourage people to listen to Greg's podcast because he tries to take he's more like you. He tries to take that really. That loving side, so not defending people, right? And I can respect that, and I respect that. I think he could be a little more solid though, because I think he kind of leaves the door open. But he has a good way of bringing it around. He did good with it. Sometimes I like to see him take a little stronger stance on it because it kind of gives like, well, that's your choice. That's agency. When gender is not an agency, it's not included agency, right? That's the way. And that.
Oh, but the agency to say I want to be a woman. I mean, I'm still allowed to do that. Nobody's going to step in the way.
Well, I guess that's the same agency, but that's the same agency once you come in the covenant path and you break you don't have free agency anymore. You just have the agency if you want to continue with that covenant or not. And so I guess that's what we're trying to say here.
Well, we can make a bad choice. We're allowed to make bad choices. That's not going to get in our way. But it
has consequences.
It absolutely does, and it always will. And that's kind of what I'm saying here. The church has to accept all, children of God with open arms, regardless. I mean, hey, even if they've been, had a sex change and decided to come to church and get baptized. Well, okay. I'm sure there's got to be a road back or a road to the gospel and to be baptized, despite, choices that might have been made to
I guess that's my point. That eventually, I think that the church may change that position for baptism, and I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay with that because the baptism is just a commitment to that. Hey, I am covenant with my Savior Jesus Christ. And as a son or daughter of God, right? Then the hope would be that the baptism should be that they're going to straighten out. Right? If we're going to actually recognize them as the gender that they're not and baptize them in that name, then we have even more confusion going down the road.
That's not what I'm saying. I don't think that we're going down that road.
Well, I think that many people think they are. And this church director actually on his website, if you go to his website and listen to Greg's podcast, I'm talking to the people listening right now. But and again, that link could be down below. But if you go to this director's website, he talks about a few principles that he's all about right now, what he wants to do with this communications department. And one of the aspects, the last one, even Greg had a problem. He said, this is a new principle I didn't know we had in the church. He says that change. That's the whole Obama thing, change, right? This whole change, this whole division, came. Look, and I think this is. I listened to Tim Poole the other day, and he made a good point. He said, he said, the variety or the what's the word I'm looking for here? We as a country try to be where we have different cultures meld in, right? And he's talking about how diversity, the whole idea of diversity. How it's beautiful, right? And that's what the rainbow represents. Well, diversity only brings on confusion. You have to have a cultural norm. And as Jordan Peterson was speaking, this is a renowned, was a clinical psychologist who has these books now, 12 Rules for Life and so forth. And he's the one who kind of started taking a stand in universities on, I'm not changing the gender just because this person just decided that's how they feel that day. I'm not going to play this game of these pronoun games, right? And he even came out lately and said, I like going to the red states because I can just be myself. In the blue states, I've got to be careful of everything. I might be sued. And this was the thing that was being said to my wife. If she says the wrong things, she and the church can be sued. Essentially is what they were saying. And so that's why we're going through this now in church. But I don't want to go to church for that. I want to be able to go to church and relax in the environment and not have to worry about somebody getting bent out of shape or butt hurt and going to the bishop and causing issues for me and my family, right? I don't want that. So if they're going to come to church, I know it's going to be tough. And I know it's going to be out there. They're going to be blasting me for this. When this finally gets people out there saying, you're just too difficult. You're not loving. I am very loving. I always look at what the consequences are going to come down the road. I look at past today and see what's going to happen down the road. Where can this go? I lived in these countries where I saw people take that little bit of an opening because they wanted all this opening. Say, you see, and run with it, including leadership. And we're going to see that. And that's going to be a very difficult road to hoe. And people are going to have to put their seatbelts on, their spiritual seatbelts on, and buckle up. And they're going to have to put their testimony in the Book of Mormon, including those war chapters. And that's something I'd like for us to go through too, because President Nelson came out last week and actually stated, I'd like to play what he said next week, Jeff. Actually said, don't worry about the war chapters and the rumors of wars. Just focus on these 2 points in the Book of Mormon. And I thought to myself, wow, we really need to be looking at that. We're going to take somebody like General Moroni, who, if we're all like him, Satan's power would be bound. And we're going to ignore that right now. Those are things right now that are being said. And we have to understand, hey, prophets have their opinions on things as well. And so do other leaders. Look, Judas Iscariot in the seminary class we talked about before, was placed in the church because corruption would always be in the church. And the corruption, as President Benson and Elder Benson at the time, he had said he worried that the corruption would pervade further into the church departments, the church office buildings. And we're seeing that, right? This is a result of that. Sure, we can be compassionate, but there's those that want to take this, and this church director believes that there is change necessary in the church in that regard as to adaptation and accepting these people that go off on these whims. I mean, and I'll finish with this, right? I know our time's up here. If I was a drunkard, or if I had these sexual habits and desires, and I come to church and I'm leaning to that and I want to give that influence, if I come to church with alcohol in my breath, are people going to want to be around me? Well, they might say, oh, we love you, but are they going to put me in positions of responsibility of the youth? They say, no, obviously you are not stable enough to discipline yourself to be in that position. We need to work with you. Where we're taking the LGBTQ idea and we're saying, well, we're just going to discard some of that standard, and we're going to allow you to do certain things. I think we're making room now. We're doing something that for a small percentage, there's probably more alcoholics out there and so forth, than there are people that we're going to address this issue with. And yet we have a standard for them. We can go on to hold down the list. There's a standard for them to live by. When I first remember, I'm a convert. When I was converted as a young teenager. When I came to church, the first thing they taught me was, here's how you dress, the standard of dress to serve the sacrament. Now, down in Latin America, they lower a lot of the standards, right? And I had a problem with that mistake. And my whole issue is to go around to the bishop saying, we need to raise the standard. We need to raise the standard because this is an ordinance. And those serving the sacrament should be dressed appropriately. Well, they're poor and they can't afford it. So wait a minute. They all have iPhones, Apple iPhones, right?
Yeah,
and they're all paying for their, they can go buy some shoes, not that expensive, and slacks and a tie and a shirt. And bishop, why don't you do it for them if they're that poor? Let's teach the standard. And what we're seeing now is a pulling away from the standard. I'm going to stay on the mooring, Jeff. I'm standing on the mooring. The boat is loose from the mooring right now and is drifting with the currents. And I believe that the Lord's going to bring that boat back to the mooring. If not, then all this was in vain. But I don't believe that's true. I know for a fact it's not true because we've been in other pastures and it's not any greener out there. The church is going through growing pains and it's going to happen. Satan's going to, look, this church is true. If it wasn't true, Satan wouldn't work so hard to bring it down. The Book of Mormon's true. If it wasn't true, it wouldn't be such an effort in Latin America at the ruin to try to hide those evidences. And they do. I can tell you that. And I can show that, right? That Satan's going to attack the church. And we're going to have to buckle our seatbelts up and say, hey, the Lord will fix this down the road. What do we do in the meantime? Well, that's open. That's what we're talking about here. And unfortunately for time-wise, we're out of time there. But I'll give you closing arguments on this, Jeff. I think it's something that's going to cause confusion. It's going to be, a lot of sensitivity here. I'm glad that these people are being recognized as children of God. But let's not cause the problem to fester. Let's not infect the problem more, right? And I feel like we're going to be doing that going down this road. Now, I don't know. I'm just saying this is what he's done in the past. These are things that he has advocated for He's very, very, very pro actually doing it. He actually condones the act of transgenderism. So I just think that's where it's going to be an issue. Jeff, you take closing arguments.
Well, I understand it's a complicated issue, and yet we are making it more complicated in life, it seems, by going around and saying, hey, we're gonna be more accepting. Um, and the church has to take a stance. It has to be accepting to all individuals. I think that us as followers of Christ, we want to be accepting to others as well. But there's nothing in there that says that we have to um, accept, immoral behavior. And I think that most people that are coming to church, are looking more toward a higher moral standard. Um, and maybe some people are just going to weed themselves out. I think there's something to be said about having these conversations so that we don't deviate too much. But the church has to take a stance. There's a legal stance. We're not going to change we're not going to change core gospel doctrine. And that's just, it's not going to happen. I think Jesus Christ is definitely the head of this church. And I think that our prophet and apostles, regardless of some decisions that seem to be questionable, because the church is allowing for pronouns, in the handbook. It says that. Does that mean that all of a sudden, down the road, something else is going to happen to where we've got to baptize, transitioned individuals and allow them, that their pronouns become solidified? They're going to start receiving the priesthood if you're a biological woman. I don't know. That's not going to happen. The church isn't really talking about that, much, but at least from what I'm hearing. But it does say that there's unfinished business. It's a complicated situation, but the church doesn't baptize those that are planning transsexual operations, and it will imperil their membership if that does. Which means that they're not going to get into the church either. There's not going to be an allowance.
Well, there may be that opening down the road. I mean, I can see that coming, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The point I want to make for our listeners is that, especially for those, the idea of the podcast is to try to bring people back to Christ, and it is a confusing world right now, and we've let this go too far, and it's our fault for not taking stances earlier and defending freedom and this whole agenda, fighting against this whole agenda, the World Economic Forum. But people just don't know about it, Jeff. Now, this podcast, I think people start following this podcast, they're going to know about these things because we're going to talk about these. We're going to say these were the secret combinations are. They're not hiding anymore. In fact, the secret combinations are meeting in Davos this month, and their whole premise this month is the World Economic Forum I'm talking about, right? And this is where the key is coming from. 9 Nations gave them teeth in 2019. Klaus Schwab started this like in 1971. They've been building up slowly but surely. It's a progressive movement. And now they got the teeth during the whole lockdown. They saw the people out of fear. So they create the fear mongering, and the hate, the hate is a fear. If you call it a hater, then you fear that, right? So they're doing everything out of fear. And I watched these countries collapse, Jeff, that I lived in. I've watched them lose their freedoms, and I'm watching it happening here. It's sad for me to do. And this is all part of it. This is what I got a problem with, because this all comes back to taking our freedom and our free agency from the rest of us. This is what this is all about. And this is why I take such a hard stance on it, because I see where this is going with the left. Right? I know where they're marching with this. And we're going to have leaders, bishops, stake presidents, they're going to fall into this, and they're going to think it's okay. And you're going to start seeing a lot of confusion. And people like my mom, who's on a road back right now, this is a tough one for her, because she's a traditional, President Benson Latter-day Saint, right? So I just think that we need to hold on, buckle our seatbelts up. I know for a fact this is the Lord's church. I know for a fact the Book of Mormon is true. And I'm holding to that because I've been out to other pastors and I've been to other churches. And I tried to be a member of other churches, and I just could not do it because I knew this was the restored gospel. So I had to make the change in my life and live those standards and come back. And I had to let things go. I had to stop doing what I was doing and change to be what I'm at now, right? And that idea, that principle will not change with the Lord. And that's embedded in the Bible, in the Book of Mormon, D&C. Those aren't going to change. Closing, Jeff. Close it up for us, bud.
I thank you for being with us on Courageous Conviction. Remember, there's 5 episodes each week that we put out. We have to go down a lot of rabbit holes, so stay with us. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and don't miss tomorrow's episode on Courageous Conviction.